The bells of Toledo rang slow and hollow that night, their echoes crawling through narrow stone alleys, over the rooftops, across the sleeping city like a whisper of judgment. The year was 1485, and Spain burned not only with torches, but with fear. In a corner of the old quarter stood the Monasterio de San Pedro Martyr, its walls thick and silent, as if hiding the breath of something unholy. Within those walls monks prayed by day, but at night they served another master. Beneath the chapel, deep under the cloisters and the stone saints, lay chambers that had never seen the sun. Down there the air was heavy with the scent of iron, wax, and despair. Water dripped from unseen cracks, and rats scurried between the boots of men in brown robes. Candles flickered against walls scratched with names of souls who had once begged for mercy. Brother Esteban de la Cruz, a young monk of 25, descended the stairs holding a lantern that trembled in his grip. He had joined the monastery seeking peace after the wars of Granada. But peace, he soon learned, had been burned at the stake long ago. The older monks, Brother Rodrigo, Father Mateo, and the silent Prior Ignacio, were already gathered around a wooden table. On it lay the instruments of purification, the rack, the pair of anguish, the thumbscrew, and the iron gag. Each tool gleamed faintly in the dim light, baptized not by holy water but by blood. "God tests our faith through pain," said Father Mateo, his voice steady. "Tonight another soul must be cleansed." The prisoner was brought down by guards. Lucía de Montiel, a woman in her 30s, accused of witchcraft. She had been a midwife in Toledo, known for using herbs, charms, and whispered prayers. But in the eyes of the Inquisition, such gifts were whispers from the devil himself. Lucia's face was pale, her eyes fierce, but resigned. She did not plead. She simply looked around, her gaze moving across each monk's face, resting a moment on Esteban, the youngest, the one who looked away. They tied her wrists to the rack, the ropes rough against her skin. Father Mateo began to chant, the words of Latin prayer filling the chamber like smoke. Exorcizo te spiritus immunde. The prayer mingled with the creak of the rack's wooden frame as it began to turn. Esteban's heart pounded. Her arms stretched. The sound of ligaments tightening filled the silence like cracking ice. He wanted to stop. He wanted to scream. But he had taken vows, of obedience, of silence, of faith. Lucia gasped but did not cry out. Instead, she spoke out through clenched teeth. "Your God hears nothing in these walls." A silence fell. The candle flame bent and flickered as if reacting to her words. Father Mateo crossed himself. "Blasphemy," he whispered. The rack turned again. A low moan broke through, a sound more human than any hymn sung above. When her shoulder dislocated, Esteban stepped back, unable to watch. His lantern shook so violently that its glass shattered on the floor. The light went out. Only darkness remained, and the echo of a woman's breath fading into it. Hours later, as dawn bled into the sky, Esteban sat alone in the courtyard. He could still hear the sound of her bones pulling apart. He dipped his trembling hands into the monastery's fountain, the water red from rust, and whispered, "Lord, forgive us. We do not know what we do." But deep down he knew they did. That night would become the first of many. And though Esteban's soul begged for silence, the screams beneath San Pedro Martyr would not let him sleep again. The morning after the torment, the monastery bell tolled 9 times, slow, deliberate, like the counting of sins. Inside the Hall of Judgment, a converted chapel now filled with cold benches and burning incense, the monks gathered once more. Sunlight slanted through stained glass, painting crimson and gold over the stone floor, as if the saints themselves bled in silence. Lucía de Montiel stood before the tribunal, her wrists bound, her face hollow but unbroken. Behind her, guards held pikes crossed, and on a raised dais sat Father Alonso de Cardenas, the Grand Inquisitor of Castile. His robe was blacker than the shadow of death. His eyes were two cold embers that never blinked. Esteban stood among the monks, his hands clasped tight. He hadn't slept. Every creak of the wooden floor reminded him of the rack's sound. Every whisper of prayer twisted inside him like a knife. Father Alonso began, "Lucía de Montiel, you stand accused of heresy, witchcraft, and communion with the devil. You were found in possession of forbidden charms and pagan symbols. How do you plead?" Lucía lifted her head slowly. "I plead guilty only of healing the sick when your God refused to." The words struck the hall like thunder. A gasp rose from the monks. One of them crossed himself repeatedly. Father Alonso's voice hardened. "Confess your sins, woman." "Save your soul," Lucía smiled faintly. "If I confess to your lie, then I betray the truth." He slammed his hand on the table. "Enough!" The echo rang across the stone walls, scattering dust from the rafters. He signaled to a scribe who unrolled a parchment, the order of torture. In red wax the decree was stamped, tormentum ad purgationem, torture for purification. But as the scroll was passed to Esteban for witness signature, something strange caught his eye. A second parchment had been half-tucked beneath it, marked with the same seal, yet the handwriting was different. It bore the crest of the Crown of Aragon, not the Church. The note read, "By order of the Crown, the lands of Lucía de Montiel are to be seized upon her death." Esteban froze. His throat dried. It wasn't witchcraft that condemned her. It was property. The Inquisition, he realized, was not cleansing souls. It was cleansing wealth. Father Alonso caught Esteban's hesitation. "Brother, is there a problem?" Esteban quickly bowed. "No, Father." But inside, the young monk's faith began to fracture. That night, as the others dined on bread and wine, Esteban stayed behind in the library, searching. He found an old registry, the Chronicle of the Trials of Toledo, 1482-1484. Every accused witch listed had owned land, gold, or houses near the city walls. Every verdict had been the same: guilty executed, and property transferred to the church. Esteban's hands trembled as he turned the final page, blank except for a single Latin line written in faint ink. "Dominus non audit qui mendacium loquitur." The Lord does not hear those who speak lies. He looked up, realizing the chamber's candles had gone out one by one. Only one flame remained, flickering near the crucifix. It almost seemed to breathe. From the silence came a soft voice, and not human, not clear. "Save her!" Esteban dropped the book. No one was there, but the whisper, the same voice that belonged to Lucía, echoed again, faint and hollow through the darkened corridor. He ran to the chapel, heart pounding, where Father Alonso knelt in front of the altar. The Grand Inquisitor did not look up. Without turning, he said softly, "You have seen the truth, haven't you, brother?" Esteban froze. I don't understand." Alonso rose, his black robe whispering across the floor. He turned, his face lit by the flickering candle. "Faith is not for understanding. It is for obedience." He placed a hand on Esteban's shoulder. "You will assist in her purgation tomorrow, and you will forget what you read." Esteban lowered his head. "Yes, Father." But inside a storm had begun, one that even centuries of silence could not drown. The night was colder than usual. Rain clawed against the monastery windows, as if the sky itself wanted to break in. Thunder rolled above Toledo, shaking the bells that hung from the tower. In the lowest depths of San Pedro Martyr, torches burned dimly, their smoke curling like dark prayers. This was the Chamber of Penance, a place never mentioned in Scripture, yet whispered about by all who served there. The walls were carved from damp stone, lined with hooks and chains. In the center stood the strappado, a rope hanging from a beam, its knot stained darker than blood. Buckets of water waited beside the rack. Iron pincers glimmered beside glowing coals. Brother Esteban entered, carrying a basin of water. Father Alonso was already there, reading from a leather-bound book, his tone calm, deliberate, merciless. Lucia knelt on the floor, her hands bound, her face bruised but proud. "This chamber," Alonso said, "is not for punishment. It is for salvation." He gestured toward the instruments. "Each device, each flame, each cut opens a path to purity." Lucia's eyes rose. "You call this purity? Then your heaven must be built on screams." Alonso didn't flinch. He closed the book and nodded to Esteban. "Begin." Esteban hesitated. His hands trembled over the rope. He could feel her gaze on him. Not pleading, not angry, just human. Something in her eyes reminded him of his mother. Burned as a Moorish sympathizer years ago, he whispered, "Forgive me," and pulled the rope. Lucia's body lifted off the ground, her shoulders wrenching back. No single drop of blood fell onto the floor, merging with the others that had long dried there. Alonso circled her slowly. "Confess and God will forgive." But Lucia's lips moved in silence, no sound. No cry. Esteban turned the rope again and again, until her breath came out in broken gasps. Still she said nothing. Finally Alonso leaned close and whispered, "Then your silence shall be your confession." He nodded, and 2 guards entered, carrying a small iron device, a pear-shaped instrument that gleamed cruelly in the torchlight. Esteban knew what it was. The pear of anguish. Inserted into the mouth, it opened gradually, tearing the jaw apart. He wanted to scream no, but the vow of obedience choked him more tightly than any rope could. When they forced the pear into her mouth, Lucia's eyes met his once more. Tears welled, not of pain but of pity. For him. And as Alonso turned the screw, the device opened with a metallic crack. Blood streaked down her chin. Her body shook once, then went still. Thunder roared above them. The candles blew out. Only one torch remained, flickering violently, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. Alonso turned to Esteban. "She has been delivered. See to it that her remains are cleansed and buried beneath the floor. The Lord will not suffer her ashes to touch holy ground." Esteban bowed. "Yes, Father." When everyone left, he knelt beside her lifeless body. The iron pear lay beside her, glistening faintly. He reached to close her eyes, but before his fingers touched her skin, her lips moved. No breath escaped, but a whisper formed, so faint it was almost air itself. "They lie." Beneath the altar, Esteban staggered back. He looked around, but no one was there. Only the echo of rain above. He stared at the crucifix that hung crooked on the damp wall. A drop of water slid down the Christ's face like a tear. He knew what she meant. There was something buried beneath the chapel altar, something they didn't want found. He rose, grabbed the lantern, and climbed the spiral staircase toward the upper cloister. His steps echoed against the stone, each one heavier than the last. As he reached the chapel door, he paused, listening. Behind him, in the silence of the dark corridor, came the faintest sound. The clink of chains. He turned. Nothing, just darkness breathing. Esteban crossed himself. "Lord, protect my soul," and pushed open the door to the chapel, the beginning of his damnation. The iron door groaned as Brother Esteban pushed it open. The torch in his hand trembled, or maybe it was his own fingers shaking. The passage was narrow, carved deep beneath the monastery like a scar through its holy heart. The air down there was thick, not with incense but with rust and the faint smell of rot. From the walls, iron hooks jutted out like claws. Ropes hung from the ceiling, stiff with dried stains. The monks called this place the Chamber of Faith, but everyone in Toledo who whispered the truth knew its real name, the Chamber of Needles. Lucía was brought in by 2 guards. Her feet dragged across the stones, her face pale but eyes still burning with that defiant calm that made Esteban's throat tighten every time he saw her. "Do you still deny your covenant with the devil?" asked Father Rodrigo, standing tall, his robe dark as a crow's shadow. Lucía raised her head. "If I speak truth, you call it lies. If I stay silent, you call it proof. Tell me, Father, what is it you wish to hear?" The torches flickered. Esteban looked down, gripping his rosary so tight that the wooden beads bit into his palm. Rodrigo's expression hardened. He motioned to the torturer, Brother Mateo, the man who had long forgotten prayer but still wore the cross. Mateo rolled out the device, a wooden board, smooth at the edges, but covered in hundreds of sharp steel points. It looked like a bed made by the devil himself. "The heretic's rest," Rodrigo whispered. "She shall confess before dawn." They stripped her of her robe and laid her upon the board. Esteban could not breathe. Each point pressed into her skin, shallow, not yet piercing, but enough to draw tiny beads of blood like tears. Rodrigo began to chant in Latin. The sound echoed in the chamber, mingling with the hiss of Lucía's slow breath. Then came the questions, the same every soul heard before the breaking began. "Did you dance with the devil? Did you summon storms? Did you charm the men of Toledo?" Lucía smiled faintly. "No storm is stronger than the lies of men." Mateo pressed the ropes tighter. 100 small punctures bloomed crimson. Esteban wanted to scream. Every cry that left her lips felt like a confession, torn from his own throat. Hours passed. Blood pooled beneath the board, dark and glistening in the torchlight. Rodrigo's voice grew fainter, his conviction trembling as if even he feared the shadow of what they had become. And then, the silence. Lucía's head tilted back. Her eyes, half open, seemed to look through the ceiling or through the monastery, into something far beyond. "You cannot kill truth," she whispered. "So it haunts the ones who spill it." Her body went still. Esteban knelt beside her, tears falling onto the blood-stained wood. He wanted to pray, but no words came. Only guilt, only the memory of faith long dead. The monastery had fallen silent after the execution. No bells tolled for the dead. No prayers rose from the chapel. Only the wind crept through the cloisters, whispering against the stone like an unending confession. Brother Esteban hadn't slept in 2 days. He wandered the corridors like a ghost, robes torn, eyes hollow. Every flicker of candlelight reminded him of the fire in Lucía's eyes. But what tormented him most was her last whisper. "You cannot kill truth. It haunts the ones who spill it." Those words followed him like a shadow that refused to leave. That night, while the other monks prayed, Esteban descended once more into the dungeons. He walked past the Chamber of Needles, past the racks and the wheels, until he reached a sealed wooden door, one he had never seen before. It was carved with strange symbols, crosses twisted into circles, Latin words that had been scratched out with a knife. The wood was charred as if fire had once licked its surface. He hesitated, then pushed it open. Inside was a small room, filled with the scent of mold and burning wax. On a stone table lay a book, its cover blackened and brittle, like it had survived a fire meant to erase it. He opened it carefully. The pages were yellow and fragile, but the ink was clear. It was a journal, written in the hand of Father Rodrigo himself. "To cleanse the city of sin, we must become the sword of God. Yet every stroke stains us deeper in the blood of our own souls." Esteban's hands shook as he turned the pages. There were lists of names, men, women, children, accused of heresy. Margins filled with notes confessed under fire, resisted the wheel, died before sunrise, and then, near the end, a passage written in hurried script. The council demanded purity, but their coffers demanded gold. We branded witches who owned land, heretics who spoke against the crown. The Inquisition is no longer God's will. It is man's greed cloaked in prayer. Esteban froze. His heart pounded so loud it echoed in the chamber. He turned another page, and there, pressed between the sheets, was a lock of hair, dark, burnt at the ends. Lucia's. He dropped the book, stumbling backward. The torches flickered. From somewhere deep within the monastery came a faint sound, like footsteps, soft and deliberate. "Brother Esteban." He spun around, but no one was there. The voice was low, echoing, familiar. It came again, closer. "He opened what was meant to burn." He grabbed the torch, heart racing, and fled up the passageway. The flames danced wildly, casting monstrous shadows along the walls. When he reached the chapel, he stopped, for the altar candles were already lit. And there, lying upon the altar, was the same book of ashes. It had followed him. The air grew cold. He fell to his knees. "Forgive me," he whispered. "Forgive us all." The candles flared, and the torches outside died one by one. The monastery of Toledo plunged into darkness. The monastery of Toledo stood for another 2 centuries. Kings rose and fell. Empires turned to dust. But the stones of that place, they remembered. In 1834, when the last remnants of the Spanish Inquisition were finally dissolved, a group of historians from Madrid came to examine the ruins. The church above had long been abandoned, its bells silent, its corridors thick with ivy and dust. They found the lower levels collapsed, the stairways crumbled. Yet one historian, Dr. Rafael Mendez, a man obsessed with forbidden archives, insisted on descending into what remained of the dungeons. He carried a lantern and a journal, documenting each detail for the royal archives. The smell of damp, earth filled his lungs as he entered what he described later as a place that felt like sin itself had turned solid. He walked through narrow tunnels until he reached a sealed stone door. Across its surface were Latin words almost erased by time. Veritas non moritur. Truth does not die. He pried the seal open. Inside lay a small crypt, its walls blackened by old fire. And there, resting upon a stone altar, was a burnt object, fragile and black as coal. He brushed away the ash. It was a book, half melted, half intact. The ink on the first page was faint but readable. A name. Lucía de Montiel. Mendez froze. He had read that name before, in forbidden ledgers of heretics, written centuries ago by inquisitors themselves. According to them, she had confessed and perished in faith, but this book was her own. Inside were words that defied everything he thought he knew. She had written her truth, from her arrest to her torture. Each page bled with anguish, but between the lines her voice rose clear and defiant. "They broke my bones, but not my soul. They took my name, yet God still knows it." As Mendez read, the air around him grew heavier. The lantern flickered. He could swear he heard footsteps, soft, echoing, just like Esteban had heard centuries before. He looked up. On the far wall, beneath layers of soot, a faint shape appeared, the outline of a cross but twisted, its arms bent downward like it was bowing, and below it, carved deep into the stone, "This is where faith was lost." Mendez fled the chamber, trembling. He took the book with him, though others warned him not to. Months later, he published his findings in a small bound volume, The Hidden Confessions of Toledo. The church denied it all. The archives were seized. The book vanished again, but whispers spread across Europe. that in the catacombs beneath Toledo on stormy nights, monks' chants could still be heard, prayers twisted into cries, echoing through the stone like the ghosts of penance. Tourists who visit today say the air there hums, faintly like voices murmuring in the dark. Some claim that if you light a candle in the lowest corridor, the flame bends, not toward heaven but downward toward the earth, toward the truth that refused to die.